So welcome everyone to Unify System Administration Training Part 2. My name's Simon Day. I'm the Head of Consulting at Unify. I'm going to be running this course today. So I'm just going to quickly cover in a brief PowerPoint what we're actually covering in today's session. So in the last session, in part 1, we looked at project governance and user management. Today, we're looking at project metadata, categories and workflows. And then next week's session, we'll look at designing templates, and that's specifically document templates within Unify. So again, just to keep the recap going here, last week we went through configuring access for users and what you can do with users and the governance matrix. I'll just skip past that. So let's look at what we're going to do today. So we're going to look at what metadata is in Unify for projects, issues, documents, milestones and risks, issue templates, project templates, custom fields, and use cases for custom fields. So there's quite a bit to get through on that front. And if there's any particular use cases you're looking at, then we'll discuss those along the way. So just one moment. So as we looked at in the last session, access to the configuration in Unify is through the menu and then under configuration. And we explored a few of those last week. We're going to be exploring some more of these today. But I'm going to start by talking about what metadata is in Unify. So if you're familiar with the term of metadata, metadata is data about your data. So in Unify, almost all data is project data. So it's information we have within the system through the modules in Unify, which are all integrated about a particular project. So I've got a list of projects here. If I drill into one of those, this one Chelsea Point here, we've got, documents and issues and, budgeted costs and contracts and all this other stuff that is data related to this project. So we can apply project metadata to this, which is a key feature of Unify. And within this project here, you'll see we have the sector, the project type, the service line, the location, and the current phase. And these are all project metadata. So we are tagging this project with what sector it belongs to, what type of project is it, what service line does it fit in within the organization, where is it, with its location, and what is its current phase. And all of that information can be used to aggregate data across the portfolio such that you can, in Unify, go and report on what are all the high-level issues we have on residential projects, or what is going on in my independent verification service line. Is that performing well or not? So we can use this to answer questions. And in each organization that uses Unify, and in each deployment of Unify, these are configured to suit the use case for that particular deployment of Unify. So this one is, set up as a cost management deployment. And what we're doing is categorizing the projects according to this, organization that is managing costs on behalf of its clients for these particular, projects. In your organization, you may find that these are labeled differently because your use case for Unify might be different. So for example, you might have a deployment of Unify that you are using to run a large infrastructure project. And what we tend to do with those deployments is, because the whole deployment of Unify is the project or the program, depending on how it's broken down, what's normally a project in Unify becomes a subset of the work breakdown structure of that project, the level at which it makes sense to hold the data. And the metadata filters get usually renamed to reflect what the levels of that work breakdown structure are. So just to, make one up, the location is quite often actually changed to be a zone. So, if it's a large infrastructure project, let's say it's a massive pipeline, and the project has been broken up geographically into zones, we can use that location filter to categorize each part of it as part of that zone. The service line in that case is often changed to be the discipline. So the engineering or other delivery discipline that's doing its part of the puzzle in that level of the work breakdown structure. So you would have your list there of civil engineering and mechanical engineering, hydraulic, and whatever else it might be, tunneling expertise, project management, and so on. And then the sector and project type are usually changed to reflect level 1 and 2 of the work breakdown structure, which can be very, very unique, depending on what the deployment is. And usually the current phase will stay with that. That will stay with the project lifecycle phase. So if I click into this one here, we can see we've got a typical, construction lifecycle phase here. The project starts out as an opportunity. If we have to bid for it, it might go in as a submission. Sometimes this is referred to as, a tender phase. Then it's in concept design, detailed design. It goes through the tendering process. This one is now flagged as being in construction. And then we have some other ones here, which are also live phases. So an awarded project. So if you're not going to use these, you can have that. Implementation is the same thing, then defects, and then completed. Or, the project was cancelled, we lost the project, went straight from these ones down to a lost, or it was on hold. So there's a whole range of uses for this. And just to demonstrate that within Unify, if I go to all projects, I've got up here the portfolio filters, and I can immediately here say, give me, I want to see all of the commercial projects. And within commercial, I just want to see the projects that are a new build. And then in addition to that, I just want to see the projects that are in Adelaide. So, Unify itself is a reporting interface, and this has now highlighted for me the projects that are commercial new builds located in Adelaide. And I've got this basic information about these projects. And then if I go to any of the other modules in Unify, so if you've done our cost reporting training, you'll be familiar with some of this. So I'll go to the costs module here, and I've got, I'm not sure what we're building in Adelaide, a Masked Singer production facility and an asylum. Maybe they go from being on the Masked Singer to being in the asylum. So I can see, what is, if I was using this to break up the portfolio I was managing, this would give me, here are my budgets for this, here's my forecast, what's happening in this section of the portfolio budget that I'm managing. Or I can use this to build up a picture of a program of projects within this, portfolio of projects. Or if this is a Unify as a platform for a large infrastructure program or program of works, then I can see what piece of the work breakdown structure I'm looking at. I might be looking at all the civil engineering works here and how the budget's progressing for civil engineering. And then I can change the view to look at it for electrical engineering or, tunnel design or whatever it might be. So it's all about cutting and dicing that information and using this metadata to achieve that. Bobby, you had a question.
Yes. So if I had a question yesterday with David and Chris, and he asked Chris asked, like, if you accidentally delete a project, how can you recover it?
So a project can't be deleted in Unify. There's no way to actually delete a project. So if I drill into this project here, Charters Towers, you see there's no delete button.
Yep.
Basically, a project is either open or closed. So this is actually perfectly contextual, because we're going to look at how we set up these project metadata. So I've talked about how they're used. So if I go into the configuration now and go to project configuration. So you gave me an excellent segue there, Bobby. Thank you for that. And we'll look at each of these, but I'm going to go to life cycle now here, and you'll see that each of these life cycles can be flagged as being a pre-award or a completion state. All right, so pre-award is for your purposes. It's either in your pipeline. So if you're a organization that is delivering projects, you're an aged care provider or a government body, and you're managing, these are your projects, you would have a pipeline. That pre-award is your pipeline. If you are a consultancy, then that pipeline are the projects that you are chasing and the opportunities that you're chasing, you're trying to win. If you have this, that can also be used if you're using Unify as a work breakdown structure for either parts of the project that have not yet been awarded to you or have not yet started as well, which can be useful for dealing with timesheets. And then we've got the completion state here. So if I scroll down here, we've got a bunch of ones that are flagged as being a completion state. So a project, if it proceeds happily through its life cycle, everyone loves it, opening ceremony, cut the ribbon, deal with the defects, close the project. That goes into your completed state. Something happens and the project doesn't go ahead, cancel state, you didn't win the job, lost. There's also on hold as a kind of temporary closed state there. Now, we're going to create some of these, so these can be configured to what you need, but any project that's been created in Unify, if it's not in your current list of projects, and if I go back to the summary module here, what I'm seeing are the projects that are open, because if I open up this, the default setting for lifecycle phases is open. If I change that to all, I get a whole bunch of completed projects here and cancelled projects. So as you can see, we had a raft of donut factories and ice rinks and mini golf courses and water slides that we built in Adelaide. But those projects have all been finished. So they're completed, and these two down here were cancelled. But yeah, there is no deleted project. So if you can't see the project anymore, it will be in one of these closed lifecycle phases, which may be different in your deployment. They may be called something else, but you can filter for them to see it. I can come here and say, what are all the projects that fit this profile that were cancelled? And there they are. There's 4 of them.
Sorry, I don't mean
yeah, Kyle.
Well, I was with Bobby in the meeting yesterday. It was actually a PCG report that was deleted. We were wondering if you could.
Oh, okay, a document that was deleted. Yeah, sure. So, so with documents, so when we're in the documents module here, we can see based on all these projects, what actually, I'll open this up to get more documents. So I'm just, getting rid of those chips there, and that puts me back to the default view.
Okay.
I've removed the filters, and you'll see here there's a status filter. So again, documents can't be deleted either. Well, they can be deleted, but when they're deleted, they go into a deleted view here, and as a system administrator can restore that document.
Okay.
So once, so the rule is once a document has been signed off, only a system administrator can delete that document. And there are some business rules that can apply that will prevent a system administrator from being able to delete the document. However, the document is there and can be restored.
Okay. That's really good to know. So it's essentially just transferred. The status is just transferred.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously deleted documents won't be factoring into any reports, or basically Unify is not going to use that data at all.
Okay.
You know, if it was a progress claim, that is not going to be reflected in the contract and in the, you know, contract registers. And, you know, if that document relates to, you know, claiming funds off the contract, it won't have done that. So they're completely inactive documents, deleted documents, but they are still there, and you can restore them should you need to, if they were deleted inadvertently, or the reason for the deletion's been reversed.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. So what we've got here, so I've gone back into configuration and project configuration here, and we'll see that when I went into this portfolio and use one of these lists here, so I had selected commercial here. So here's this list, and as a system administrator, this is where you can create this list. So we've got our list of sectors here, and I can, you know, edit these if I wanted to, you know, rename one of them because the terminology had changed. So, you know, if I wanted to change aviation to be, you know, airport services for some reason, I don't know why you'd do that, but if you had different terminology, we could just change that, and then that will now be the terminology that's used for aviation within Unify. So, you know, if you set these up and then someone comes along and says, no, we're not calling that commercial anymore, we're calling it something else, then, you know, aged care, we're now calling aged and residential care, whatever it might be. You can just change it in here. All the projects that are associated with that will remain associated with that. And, you know, you can then just, you know, re-tag them if necessary. And we can add to this as well. So we can add another thing in here. So if we had, you know, a particular sector of you know, if we want to have tunnels as a sector, I don't know why we would, but we might. We can just add that as a sector. And you'll notice when I'm adding it, you can have codes to these as well. So you don't have to use these, you have to have a code, but you can. That is particularly useful when I talked about this use case of Unify being used for a single large project or infrastructure project or program, and you've got work breakdowns. They usually have coding structures with them. We can capture that here so we can match data on that coding if necessary. So the sectors are also like level 1, if you like, if you're looking at it from a work breakdown structure perspective. Next one there is project type. So project types can apply to all the projects, or they can be a subset of a sector. So for instance, we just added tunnels as a sector. We could have a project type being long tunnels, which is a subset of tunnels, and a project type of short tunnels. You can tell I know a lot about tunnels here with my in-depth analysis there of types of tunnels. So they're now available as 2 project types. So if I mark a project as being in the tunnels sector, I can then make it say this is a long tunnel or a short tunnel. And people go, oh, that's a fascinating insight into tunnels. Kyle.
How would you go about separating, so just backtracking for 1 second, how would you go about separating the codes from either a project breakdown or a trade breakdown? Is that something that would be down to the coding system on our end, or is it more, is there an option to sort of segment it that way?
Yeah, look, we'll come to that. Okay. Because that's when we look at cost structures. So yeah, which is another set of metadata. But yeah, we'll look at that, and I'll show you there's some configured examples in here. So yeah, let's park that one, but I'll fit it into this session. So you'll see that some of these don't have a sector, and that means they apply to all sectors. So anything can be marked as being a new build or a refurbishment. And yeah, you can use these whatever you need them for. So service lines here, as I said, sometimes these are used for disciplines, for engineering management. But again, you can have codes. If Unify has been used for practice management or project delivery within your organization, this usually reflects the service lines within your organization. Is it the project management team? Is it the QSs? Is it the independent verification? So these can be used to reflect that. Then we have locations. So locations have two levels to them. The first level is a region, and then a location within a region. Now, how you use this is entirely up to you. Here, it's been used to show states within Australia and then international countries on top of that. So, we've got the UK and the US, but we don't have all the states within the US. And then it's got the office locations within each of those regions. So we see London here is within the UK. For some reason, we have two Melbourne ones, but they're different addresses. We've got Shanghai in China and so on. So, we can add another one in here, and we had London, and let's just say we also had, Manchester in the UK. And now we've got another location within the system that we can flag our projects as belonging to. Then lifecycle we talked at a little bit, but what I didn't mention was that lifecycle is really part of your methodology in Unify and as to how you deliver your projects. And you can have multiple methodologies. So when we looked at the example on the project before, it came up with these, concept design and detail design and tendering. And you'll see that these have been restricted to projects in the residential, commercial, industrial, and aged care sectors. So if you set up a project that's not in those sectors, it's not going to give you that breakdown of the life cycle. This means you can have different types of life cycles in Unify. So you could have a typical construction life cycle. You could have a variant on that construction life cycle because it may be in the aged care sector, they use a different terminology to what's used for large infrastructure projects. So you could have two sets of life cycles within there that are used for those particular sectors. You may have some projects that you do that aren't construction related that might have a, waterfall life cycle or an agile life cycle or some other methodology. And so you can tag them with that accordingly. Now, these can be tagged by sector, project type, service line, and location, and any combination of these. So it can get very, very, very specific. And the idea with that is when you drill into a project, so I just pick this particular project and go to the summary module. I'll just clear these. So if I pick this one's flagged as being a corporate project, and it gets this list of life cycles. So it gets concept development and implementation. And that's based on what's made available to it through this list here. So here we are, we've got a PMO lifecycle, concept development, implementation, and closeout, that's available to the PMO service line. So because this is flagged as being a PMO service line, there's its lifecycle that's available to it. And if I was to change that to be project management, we get a different lifecycle. So it's all about the context for that. So have a play with that. I'll pause for the moment. So we're going to look now at some more metadata fields within Unify. So I'm going now to configuration and issues. And you'll see here with issues, we have issue categories. So these can be used for all sorts of things. So we're going to look at some of the use cases for these, such as RFI management. But that's going to be in a little bit. But essentially, the idea is we can come up with any category to categorize issues within the system that will be useful to us. As you can see here, this has been used for a number of training things, and there's all sorts of things such as baked goods, and but other ones that would make sense in a project context, such as minutes and agendas and insurances and financials and environmental and whatever it is. What I usually do with clients when we're configuring this is I would look at the reports they're producing. So the PCG report that they're doing, or what other project report, and the headings in those reports are a good guide as to what issues you need. I would also look at what registers you're producing. So unless it's a register that relates to something to do with the contract, like your variation register and your progress claim register, if you're having to produce a register of non-conformances on the project or a defects register, then we want a category for that such that you can use the issues functionality in Unify to capture that data. Because as soon as you have a category for it, you can run a report that spits out the data from that issue into a table in Excel or into a PDF and produce that register just instantly. I mean, you need the data there in the system, but the category enables the register to exist. So address that's the question of anyone using issues management, quality management system. Yes. Yeah, so, you can use the issue system when, doing a project audit to flag the non-conformances or recommendations that need to be acted upon. If you are being assessed, so you're being audited, and you have your project plan that says, here is how I will manage my project, your headings from that might want to reflect your issues. And when someone says, well, show me how you're doing RFIs, you go, great, issue system, filter for RFIs. Here are all the open RFIs. Here are the closed ones. Here's the actions for people who are, we're waiting on. It's all here and it's all live. We've done many, many configurations over the years, including, myself working in organizations before I joined Unify, where I was, using it to manage and to, set up and help people to run projects and programs of works where we were in that particular situation. So where, essentially it says, this is our methodology, this is how we will deliver projects, therefore that's the quality, that's our quality management system. So yeah, Unify can be configured and is designed to be configured to deliver your quality management. And our experience has been that if you get audited on a project and you're using Unify, you will get a good outcome from that audit. If you are using it as as it's been configured. If you're ignoring it, well, you'll get all sorts of problems. But if you're using it, then you're all usually able to then demonstrate to the auditor that here it is. Here is how we are following our processes in the system. And that's in fact what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about workflows and processes And this stuff we're talking about now with metadata configuration is the first step for configuring the system to do those. And again, here, when I add an issue category, because it's about processes, so I might want an issue category for something that only relates to the airport services one. And that might be, you know, airside safety, for example. And again, I'm making stuff up here, but that would only apply to the airport services projects we're doing. And it might be vital to produce a register here and to show the processes that we're undertaking in relation to it. But it doesn't have any bearing on our aged care jobs. So we don't want it clogging up the issues list on our aged care jobs or have someone using it inadvertently. So we just have that issue category specifically for that type of project or that sector, that project type, that service line, and that location. So it can be very, very specific. You may have a particular project methodology that you have to deliver for, yeah, I mean, one I can think of off the top of my head is the Department of Transport and Main Roads in Queensland have their own, you know, like basically contract system, and Unify has been configured for that with many of our clients who do work for them, but that only applies to those projects that they run in Unify in Queensland on those particular civil engineering and roadworks projects. And there's a whole lot of issue categories and document templates and other things that relate to that that would only apply when you're doing that project. You don't want to go use them on another project because it, you know, they're not relevant. So this is a way of, you know, having that methodology in Unify, but having it contained to particular types of projects. So that's issue categories. We have the same thing for risks, and it's basically identical, but it obviously relates to the way you have the system configured for risks. So we have our risk categories. Risk categories, though, are system-wide. So risk is more of a system-wide thing rather than being a methodology that's limited to a particular you know, part of the system. That's the only difference between the two. And then one more example of that in the time configuration is milestone categories. So we might want to categorize the milestones we're tracking on the project into groups. And so we have a category for those. There's a few other examples of it to point out. In the contracts module, we have contract standards. So you can flag, you know, essentially what contract standard you're using. Here we've got a list of AS standard contracts. And when you create a contract in Unify, you can apply this metadata to it. So we know it's a AS 4122 versus a 4949. And you can do more with that, which we will talk about next week in the document templates, because there's a lot of stuff there that relates to contract management. But again, that's another form of metadata as it applies to the contracts module. Related to this, if I go into configuration and chart of accounts, in the cost management training that we did, if you ever refer back to those training sessions, we talk about standard chart of accounts and project-specific charts of accounts. So we've got some examples here of various charts of accounts. And if I drill into one of these, so, you know, these are a form of metadata to your budgets and cost reporting. So depending on which of these you use, then all of the cost reporting gets put into this structure as well. Now, if I drill into this one here, say this post-contract one, we'll see here we've got our overall project code, our header codes, and our detail codes here. And this breakdown, and if you did our cost management training, you'll be familiar with this because this is the one we use in that example. And we've also got this MPWC one, here, which is typically used by QSs, cost managers, doing cost plans. So this is in here to reflect that particular usage of Unify. So there's two examples of different cost structures that then apply either to your revenue or your cost module. And you can tell which one they're going to be in by the type. So project cost is one that you use to manage costs for a project that doesn't reflect what's going on internally with you. Internal costs are your costs. So if Unify is connected to your financial system, be that Xero or Mob or Oracle or Microsoft Dynamics or whatever it is, then you can manage your internal costs on your project directly through Unify, and then that can flow through into the financial system, and it can flow back from the financial system depending on the system itself. But we can map all of that through an internal cost chart of accounts. And then you have internal revenue, which you would use for your billing, which then links to the revenue module. But then you've got cost structures that reflect project delivery that you're doing on behalf of your client. You are not incurring these costs, and they are the ones flagged as being project costs. Now, if you think back to last week's session where we talked about governance structures and access levels for users, this also applies to charts of accounts. So we have here that these ones are available to people who are on a project manager license, but you've got to be on a higher license here of a program manager to be an internal person to see anything about revenue. So you can see anything to do with cost on a project manager license, but you need to have a higher level of access to see the revenue information. So yeah, that's another example of that within the system. So let's just look at where we are at. Okay, now there was one more metadata thing that I hadn't mentioned, which is documents metadata. And again, it's the same thing. We have document categories here, and that can allow for, when you're creating your templates, which is what next week's session is about, the document category is like if you were to think about it, filing your documents in an old, share folder structure, the document category is like the first level of that structure. And then the document template name is the second level. So here I can filter to show me all contract admin. If I go back to all projects, so I actually get some results, show me all contract admin documents. And within that, I want to see, project manager instructions. And there we are. Throughout the whole system, I've now got my list of project manager instructions, and then I can see what it is on a particular project, should I need it. Oh, and that's ones who are deleted because we've got the status there as well, which is another bit of metadata. If I go status open, there are no project manager instructions. Hooray. Only deleted ones. Let's pick a different one. Let's go with payment certificate. No, not having a good, let's go variation order. There we go. There's 3 variation orders. So yeah, in this case, we're using categorizations to, save this, and we're using a matrix structure here rather than a folder structure. And that applies to all of these things we've looked at. And the other thing to remember with the metadata is that this document here, this variation order on this largest game reserve, inherits the project metadata as well. So, I can come here and say, I just want to see variation orders issued on aged care projects, and there are none because I'm having a lot of luck here with the documents that are being used. Show me all contract admins, and there's a certified progress claim. There's been one contract admin document in all the aged care projects in this deployment. But so that document inherits the project metadata, so you can use that as well as part of it. And that goes for issues and contracts and anything else. Everything within all the modules is inheriting project metadata, And then within each module, there's metadata you can configure to then further categorize that data for that module. So that's metadata. Hooray. Lots to talk about there. So now we're going to look at some templates in Unify. And there's a couple of sorts here, issue templates and project templates. And then we're going to deal with that once we get through templates to custom fields and how we can use all of that together in a use case to do stuff. So pressing on. So again, within configuration, and this time I'm going to configuration and issues. And we've looked at issue categories, issue escalation. That's another piece of metadata here. That's used typically for reporting. So if I'm going to bring my issues into a PCG report, I would only want to, show the issues that have been flagged to the steering committee and up, because I don't want to give them everything. I only want to give them the things for their consideration. So it's a way of flagging issues to do that. But here we come to issue templates. So issue templates are a way of managing workflow within Unify. And what it allows you to do is to put in common workflows or common sets of actions such that you can very quickly log this information within the system. So we've got some here. So let me show you one in action. So if I go to the issues module and I go to get that out of that aged care project, and I pick this project here, and I'm adding an issue, and let's say this is this has come through, and it's an RFI here, and it's RFI number 4. And what I'm going to do is select from this list here an issue template. I'm just going to select this FYI template. So I do save and drill to create the issue. And what you can see here is that this one has given an FYI. This is a very simple template. It's like, I want everyone associated with the project in a particular role to know about this. So this has gone and flagged all of those people. So when I find this one here in the list, what it's done, it's given an FYI action to everyone who is in the team member role on this project. So that's what that's done. Now, if I do another one, and let's say this is a client issue, and I'm going to use this contract dispute one here. I'm going to save and drill. Now what I've got is a set of more specific actions with due dates. So this is telling me who needs to do what and by when. Now, one of these is blank. So when I go to the issue admin here and look at it, so what we've got here is a set of actions with due dates assigned to people in particular roles. Now, we looked at setting up roles within Unify as part of your governance structure and your project team in the last session. So in this one, the contract administrator has to send the service notice. Then this is what the project manager does. Then it escalates to the project director to commence legal proceedings. So I've just applied that in here, but no one is in the role of contract administrator. So it's left that blank. But what it has done is it has given these due dates for these, and those due dates also affect my overall due date of the issue. So this is telling me I have got if that's then assigned to whoever the project manager is in this, let's just assign it to Rose for the sake of this. Rose has got to the end of December to resolve this. Otherwise, we're going to end up in court because things have reached such an impasse that we've had to activate the dispute resolution part of the contract. So if you want to jump in and create one of these, it's pretty straightforward. You just click on Add. And it'll give you a form to fill in. So initially we need the name of the template. I'm going to call this one an important process. Now I can set an overall due date for this template if I want to, but I'm not. I'm going to leave this blank. And I have the option here of saying it's business days or elapsed days that apply with this. Now, it may be that you have some processes that relate to particular contracts that you do that are business days, or that are just, calendar days. Doesn't matter whether it's the weekend or public holidays or what. It's just days elapsed. So this allows you to set that accordingly. I'll leave this as business days. It just does it as a standard week. There's not a calendar that links to this to take into account public holidays. Again, methodology in Unify, we can link this back to the metadata, link it to, this is only something that would apply on, airport services, aged care and environment, or whatever it might be. Sectors, project types, service lines, and locations. This can be a specialized thing that only applies to certain stuff, but I'm just going to leave it blank here. I hit save to create that, and that's now in my list for me to add actions to here. So I can put in my actions, and then assign who does that on the project. So this is going to start with the project manager, and they've got 4 days to do the first thing on the list. And then 6 days later, we want the project director to have checked what they've done. And then some more time to do the second thing. So as you see, these are sort of elapsed days. So it's not, this doesn't come 6 days after that. This comes 6 days after you log the issue. And who are we going to give that to? Let's put it back to the project manager. So it's just a simple one of something happening between a project manager with some oversight by the project director. And, the idea with this is it's anything that's happening regularly on your project that is a standard process or a standard workflow. So, you may have contracts that you're managing that when a particular thing happens, for instance, an event that might trigger an extension of time, that might trigger you have to do particular things within particular dates. The contractor has to do things within particular dates for this all to apply. This allows you to log that at the point that it happens, and then you've got these dates tracking. These flow into each individual's task list. You can run reports to see, have these been done? Are they now overdue? They've been ignored, they've happened. We have examples of deployments of Unify on large infrastructure projects that are being used for infrastructure verification. So documents and site visits and various other information being fed into Unify. Each one of those coming in triggers a review process. The person logging it selects the appropriate review process that applies to the documents that have been transmitted in. That's an action list here, and then they know from the point they've received it, they are tracking this, and they contractually have to respond by a certain date, and they can then consolidate this and report on it. They can say, for the concept design reviews, we did 40 of them last month, we did 35 of them on time, 5 of them were late, and we were given 10 that we were unable to respond to because we went back saying that they were, incomplete, and you haven't responded back. So they're still open. So, it can be used to do those sorts of processes. I mentioned contractual processes. Another one there is processing, claims, meeting the various legislative requirements. With that, you have 5 days to assess the claim, then it goes back to the contractor, and they've got X number of days to issue the invoice, and then the client has X number of days to pay. That can all be tracked with a list like this. Here, we've got one for a process for insurance renewal. So you can use Unify as an insurance register. Are you holding all the insurances on the project? And then, asking for the updated insurances. Another one here is, a non-conformance, NCR. And there's the process that you do. Basically the same thing here with a different name. There's the progress claim I mentioned. Basically any regular, repeatable workflow that you have on a project where you want to collaborate with your project team to achieve it. Because this is, we also do, issues management training where we look at actually doing one of these and, playing around with these processes. So I recommend you do that as well if you haven't done it already. But this is how we set it up. So, the scope for doing all of this is, quite large. There's quite a lot you can do. And then this, feeds in everywhere. The issues system is very integrated. It's integrated with resources. It can integrate with contracts and documents, reports. You get, you can get a very rich set of information, and you can be on top of things. You know exactly where things are if you're managing things within this. And most of you are probably familiar with the Outlook integration. So I might log something like this. One of these might be triggered by an email. So I can save the email and select this issue template and start this process directly from my email if this process exists within the system. So that's issue templates. If we then take that up a level to project templates. So I'm just going to pick this project here, Greensborough St Mary's Aged Care. You'll notice when you're creating projects, which we handle in our other training, there's a copy button here. So I can go to any project and hit copy. And when I hit copy, I get this copy with, right? Copy with issues, copy with budget, copy with resources, contracts, resource planning, milestones, and risks. That's a huge amount of data that you can copy when you create a project. Now, you can copy an existing project that has some of this information that might be relevant, right? For instance, it might have the same or largely the same project team on it. So you tick the resources and you don't have to assign that project team to the new project. That's straightforward. But you can go deeper than that. And you can even set up projects as, templates. So again, if you have a repeatable project that happens, that so we have examples of clients who are running a program of works, and there might be, say, 10 different types of projects that are done. So I'll use the example of road works design, and there might be a traffic light upgrade, a roundabout, bridge works, bike lane, and each one of those projects has a bunch of information and tasks which can be set up as issues, an indicative budget, a typical resource plan for it, milestones that need to be achieved. When we do this, we have to, do these, and they can all be set up as a project that's flagged as being a template project in Unify, and typical risks. When we do a roundabout, these are the typical risks. And you can basically use the copy project to create that project with all of that data there, so you're not building it all up from scratch. So when you do that, you can then just go in and amend that data, put the due dates against it, change the start date of the resource plan to when it's actually starting to happen, reassign it to the people who are going to be working on it without having to build it all up from scratch. So particularly useful where you have, your organization, you might have a smaller project that you might say, oh, this is too small to set up in Unify, but it's a common thing that you do that's very repeatable. And if you have a template for it, then setting it up in Unify is a doddle. Takes 2 seconds, because you just copy the last one and make a few changes, and then you're tracking it and you're reporting it. It might be a small report, condition report that you do on something that, might be over and done and dusted in a week, and you don't want to spend half a day setting it up in Unify. Not that it would take that long anyway, but you don't want to spend 2 hours setting up in Unify. You want to take 10 minutes, because otherwise it's just not worth creating. A template will give you that. Or it could be a massively complex thing where it's faster for you to go through and amend things rather than create them from scratch. So that's project templates. Fantastic where projects are essentially being called off to you, or common things being repeated, and you would use that template. So you might stick them in a project type of template. You can use these configurations to, keep them somewhere. You might have actually a lifecycle phase, which is template that's a closed lifecycle phase. So you keep them there as a closed project, and you just go find them and then copy them to be a live project, so they don't show up in all your reports. So you can use this configuration to your advantage to achieve that. So that's templating. So we talked about this standard metadata, putting in templates to achieve particular things, including some workflows. But all of these standard fields might not be enough. You might need more information. And so for that, we have custom fields. So if I go into this particular project here in the summary module, you'll see here there's 2 things here, custom fields and periodic fields. Drill into this with custom fields here, and this gets to some use cases for these. We've got these fields created for building areas, building functional units, council details, facade types, which is an interesting list here. And various metrics, what flavor of donut is going to apply here, what flavor of ice cream. And the same thing applies for issues. So I pick one with an issue. So we have our standard fields here for an issue. And then after the template, we've got these fields, which are custom fields, which can change depending on the type of issue it is. So all of these are configured in configuration against the configuration for the various modules. So project custom fields, we're under project. We go to custom fields. Actually, I forgot to mention there's actually 2 types of them. Pick one of these. So we looked at custom fields. There's also periodic fields. So these periodic fields allow you to have a custom field on a project that is a month-by-month data capture. So the example we've got here is safety stats. So you might be capturing the safety stats for the month because you need to report on those. And if we're capturing them here, they can be pasted in from Excel. Then this is can be used then for reports. So you might not be the source of that information, it might be being provided to you by the contractor on what's happening on site, but you then need to produce the reports to the client. So if they give it to you in Excel, you can paste it into Unify and it factors into your reporting. But there's a whole range of, you know, use cases for that. We've had it used for all sorts of different things. So all of these are set up in here. Now, custom fields also have categories. So you would have seen here, building area, and then a series of fields. Building functional unit, there's a series of fields. So again, that's another form of metadata, but this is also designed to help you group fields together for ease of data capture and to help make sense of them. So there's the categories, and you know, we can add a category. That's fairly straightforward. And then we can add a custom field. And there's lots of stuff you can do here. So first of all, I can select the category that it, you know, relates to. I'll go with residence type. What have we got there already? We've do something there. Say it's the number of windows. So valid for, is it a whole of project or a financial period? So financial period, that's the periodic custom fields. The order here just controls the order it appears in this list within the category, and it'll just get whatever the next number is, but you can change that up. Again, this can apply to particular methodology. It may be that this is a field that is only for aged care projects. So your metrics or your project custom fields you capture for aged care might be very different to a commercial project. This is, you know, you want to know number of independent living units, all that sort of stuff. And then the key thing here is the type of field. So text field, it's just inputting text. Rich text, you can write War and Peace. It's a number. When it's a number, you can say, what's the unit of measure? You know, it's a percentage, it's meters squared. Go to town. And then, of course, we have particular types of numbers: currency, dates, lists and checklists we're going to look at in a second, images, and files. So you can have a particular file uploaded or an image there that can then be used in reports. Let's talk about lists and checklists. So if I select list here, I get a series of lists. If I select checklist, I get another series of lists. These are all driven from configuration custom lists. So have a play with this, create a list and create a custom field. It's pretty straightforward to do. So I'm back here with this one that I had called, I stopped adding it. Oh, here we are. So I'm going to call it window type now, and it's going to be a list, but I haven't created the list, so I can't create the field. So here I can do add, this type is window types. And then I just put the contents in. Now, if I've got this in, you know, another document, I can just copy and paste it in. Even if it's in Excel, you can just copy and paste it in here from a list in Excel and it will appear. But, you know, I don't have that. And whatever it might be. So here are all the various types of windows that we might want to tag this in. So now that I've got that saved, it's not going to appear here. I have to cancel this and refresh this so it picks up that change within the system. And now if I add this and make it a list, I will get my, no, not yet. Basically, it just hadn't refreshed to pick up that change in the system. So if I go out of that and back in to custom fields, and now add it and say it's a list, I will get the window types. Ta-da! So I can have my window type list for residence type in aged care. So that will now, if here I'm in this aged care project and I go to custom fields under residential type, there it is. I can select the window type that applies to this project. Exciting times. So that can be done for issues as well. So, and this gets into one of our use cases for this. So actually, before I get onto issues, I'll talk about, so a use case for this on projects is for, so we talked about, safety reporting. That was one use case there. Any other type of reporting you need. Another use case is benchmarking. So when you have, this information here, the meters squared, functional units, Unify, this becomes metadata, which can be linked to the costs. And I'll just actually see if there's any metrics configured on this particular. Okay, so some for MPWC, great. So if I set MPWC and I'll put in, I don't know, just put in 10,000 and gross floor area of 12,000. Throw that in, and I go into the cost module now and look at the budget. You'll see these are appearing here as metrics. And let's say that's, $5,000. See if it then, so I've now got meters squared per GFA and FICA. It's obviously not big enough because if I up, I'll just put some numbers in here. So we're now getting a rate. So the system is using those project custom fields, which you can define, and it's comparing them to your budget through the metrics. So the metrics here are, we've got calculated columns, and we've got other metrics in here. These are formula that you set up to reference some standard fields in Unify. As you there's project budgets and custom fields. Project FICA is a custom field. Project gross floor area is a custom field. That is then calculating data about the project. So when you're doing the budget, you're getting feedback on what does this look like? Does this budget, would we expect to be paying, $8,000 per square meter of GFA on a project like this? Does that make sense? Yes or no? Here's, a rate specific to the substructure. So there's all sorts of stuff you can do here using this to analyze what you're doing. Now that can then be rolled up across projects to say, this project, how does it compare to other similar projects? Does it have a similar GFA? Is its GFA through the roof? Cost per GFA. So you can compare that data, and there are a bunch of reports in there that can do that, but this is how you configure that to do that. So that's a really commonly used use case for this. But this can be, whatever you need it to be, set up as these metrics. And these metrics are largely drawing on either particular parts of the budget or this project number of lists, that's a custom field. And if I go to create one here, what I get is, so I can give it, this is, I've got my, again, categories here. So you can have categories for these. So let's say it's a benchmark mate ratio. I can give it a name. And then I can build the formula. So I want the project budget. Whew, that didn't work. It's not drag and drop. We can copy it. So the project budget, in fact, no, it's not drag, it's just click on. Hey, ta-da, project budget divided by the number of 1-bedroom units, for example. And that creates that one there, if that's in any way meaningful. So, whatever formula you can come up with to do anything interestingly. So here's floors compared to Fika. There's all sorts of stuff. It's all driven initially from these project custom fields. So another use case, if I go into my configuration for issues, I go to custom fields, is for RFIs. So here we've got a bunch of categories. So we've got our issue categories that we created. And one of them we created was RFIs. So for RFIs, we've got these extra fields here. One is the external reference, and the other one is the source, which is a list. Now, when I go into custom lists here, I can see there's lots of them in this one, but there's one called source. And with particular lists, I can see here list usage. This is used as for the issue custom field source. Right. And this is a drop-down list here, which has got architect services, structural, civil, latent condition, provisional sum, client change, or other. Now, we didn't look at this before, so we'll do it now. I can edit this list. Click on this and add into that building surveyor. So that's now available as a source of my RFI. So what I'm doing here, I'm further categorizing my RFIs to the source of the RFI, because if you're the project manager and the RFIs are coming at you, so these are the RFIs you're receiving, not any RFIs that you're issuing. You might be issuing RFIs to the client, but typically you're the post box for all the RFIs. They can be coming from all sorts of people. They'll have their own numbering for them, and you're having to close them out, or at least make sure that they get passed through the right person. Architect might have an RFI that then needs to be fed through to the services engineer to get the answer to come back, and you're coordinating this flow of data. So what we get then within a particular RFI, so if I filter here for RFIs, I get the source here. And there's building surveyor. So we just added it to the list. That's now available instantly for this. If I do it for architect, I can see all the RFIs that have been received from the architect. And if I go back into the configuration, because I didn't quite talk about what I need to talk about there, I got carried away and clicked away elsewhere. So when I'm adding one of these, so I could add another field in here for RFIs. And so with this, we've got a shorter list of stuff with basically, text to capture text, number, if it's date, and a list. And I'm going to add in a list here, which is Snow White, right? And call this dwarf. And then I get an option here which says users filter. All right, I'm going to tick that. So users filter. So I've created a new custom list that every RFI that comes in, I can categorize what dwarf from Snow White that RFI relates to. Obviously a very important thing to do in RFI management, but this is basically to demonstrate it because we already had the source of the RFI. So I'm back in here in my issues. Now I've just refreshed that. And if I'd say I'm looking at my quality issues, and I'll get rid of HCare, so we're looking at everything. So there are 2 quality issues logged here. That's nice. If I go to RFI, suddenly I get extra fields here. So the first one is the source, right? So these RFIs are flagged as who did the RFI come from? Architect, services, structural, building surveyor, and so on. But I've also now got this, which is a list of the dwarves as well, which obviously we don't really need, but I just wanted to show you how we could add a filter. So I go into this particular RFI here. We know the source is the architect and the dwarf is Sneezy. So if I go back up to here, I can filter for all RFIs that relate to Sneezy. And there we are. There's that one there. Obviously, probably more important is all RFIs that relate to structural and civil. There we go. So this, and again, if I drill into this one here, it says RFI 11. I go down here. This external reference here is where we've captured. So that's just a text field, but we've captured the person who was sent to it. We've captured their RFI number. And now, if I go into my reports and go to project reports and the issue register, I can use this to produce my RFI register. So here we are, my category of RFI. I've got my filter here, additional filter. So for dwarf or source, let's use source. And the time frame here, I can filter for RFIs that need to be resolved within the next 30 days. And I want to see all the structural and civil RFIs. And I hit view and I get that for the whole program. So there we are. There are all the current RFIs, well, not the current RFIs, all the RFIs that need to be resolved within the next 30 days relating to structural and civil across the whole portfolio. And I can then run that to Excel or to PDF and send it through to anyone who needs to see it. There's obviously a whole bunch of other filters there as well. You can show all issues, only open ones. So if you want a complete register, you do all. If you just want this current stuff, you do open. And if I scroll across here, we can see here that there's that external reference. So those fields that we set up as custom fields come through automatically into this report. So we don't, and this gives us the full status of things. So we can see that this particular one, has been closed. That one's been closed, and these ones are all open and overdue. So we're getting the full picture of what's happening, and I can produce that register. So that, again, I was talking about things that you want to produce registers for. That's an example of producing that register. So I'll just do one more use case, which is onboarding. And for that, we're talking about another type of custom field, which is resource custom field. So under resources, we also have custom fields. Now, resources are unique in Unify in that they are data that exist in essentially their own database separate to projects. So resources can be assigned to projects. They can have correspondence that happens with them on projects. They can be assigned to issues, to risks, to contracts, and so on. But the resource data itself is a separate data set to the project data set. So with resource custom fields, again, we've got categories here. So I've got a bunch of categories here, including one that's been created already for onboarding. So I don't need to create it again, but there it is for onboarding. Interesting one for underwater. Not sure what that's used for. So if for onboarding, there's a bunch of information I want to know about a particular resource who's being onboarded to my project. So for instance, I want to, and when I create the custom field here, I've got 4 different types of resources I can create custom fields for. Contacts, so that's people. Assets, if you are tracking assets on a project. Organizations, which are a level above a contact. And sites, which are a subset of an organization. So in Unify, every contact belongs to a site which is associated with the organization. So, for instance, Bobby, you would be associated with the, I'm guessing, the Sydney office of DCWC. And so that's how, and then the address is maintained at the site level. So if the Sydney office moves, that address gets updated. We don't need to update your record in Unify because we've updated the site and you inherit that data from the site. If the name of the organization gets changed and rebranded, we just rename the organization, and that flows through everywhere as well. So in this case, we're creating them for a contact. And in the category of onboarding, and the field name here is going to be safety briefing. I need to know whether they've done the safety briefing. So this is going to be a list, and it's going to be a simple list. Well, I'm just going to pick a list. I'll just go with this list here. But you can have a custom list. I thought we had one that was yes, no, but it looks like it's been, oh yeah, I've got non-compliance, yes, no. So I could have used that one. Let's do that one. So that just gives me a yes, no, right? Then I want a checklist for them. So this already knows it's a contact. It's remembered you've just done onboarding, so it's going to give me another one. And I'll just call this project documents, just to call it something. So there may be a series of documents need to be issued to them and they need to sign and return to you, for example. So that's going to be a checklist. And I'll see this induction first and we'll see what we get. So I've just created 2 fields that will help me track what's happening with particular resources when onboarding them. So if I go to the resources module now, so I can go into a particular resource. So I can find your resource, Kyle. Here we go. And I go down and here's this onboarding field. And you can see there's a bunch of ones that have been set up already, including your donut preference. I'm told it's unicorn sparkles. Interesting choice. Safety briefing. Have you done the safety briefing? No, not so far. I asked you to come to it 4 or 5 times. You haven't turned up. And here's his project documents here. So this gives me his checklist. Have we done this? Yes. Have we done this? Have we done this? Yes, that's all checked. So I've captured that information about Kyle, including his favorite bridge, piles. So, you get to define what these fields are. Hit save, that updates that for Kyle. Now I can do this in bulk. So I can go to this dashboard here and you'll see we've got custom fields. We go to custom fields and again, I can change between what type of resource it is. And here are all the resources in the system where there's a lot in this particular deployment. And here are all the custom fields. Now I can filter for the category of custom fields I want. So if I'm just updating the onboarding information, I can select that. And I can do some bulk updating here, right? So if we did a briefing where we got everyone in the room and did the safety briefing to everyone who's on the project thus far, I can, come across to here and do safety briefing. That's going to be a yes, and that's going to copy it to everybody. I was saying there's no selection. I've got to, here we are. So everyone's selected here. It's just, I've got it to update every single resource record in the system, which is now done. So there we are. Everyone in one hit, because we got them all in a room. We did that by telling them we were going to record their donut preference for providing donuts every Friday. And as you can see, quite a lot of people selected tuna mornay, which is just horrendous. But in doing that, we did the safety briefing. Everyone on the project has done the safety briefing. I've done that in bulk to update that. And then we can report on that. So I've got a back to the reports module. I go to program reports. There is the resource custom field report. And again, I can select onboarding here and get a flat file here of all the people, their basic data and their onboarding data. And then I can run that to Excel if I need to provide it to anyone else. But yeah, we can see the propensity for tuna mornay donuts. Obviously not your preference, Kyle. We know that's unicorn sparkles. So again, that's just another use case here for the data capture, custom fields, workflows. And we're going to be looking at more workflow stuff in the next session with document templates, because that's another sort of workflow within Unify. So two main workflows in Unify are issues-based and document-based. So we've looked at document-based today, and then the data capture around all of that to, you know, enable the use case for that particular workflow. Okay. So I'll just bring up the PowerPoint one last time to wrap things up. Hey, and that's not what I wanted to do. Wrong selection. That's better. Okay. So we looked at these various use cases, and then in the next session, we're going to be looking at templates and what we can do with particular templates. So look forward to seeing you in that one. And thanks for attending today.